per the agenda handed out. I'll entertain a motion not to object to a liquor permit ownership revision for A&A Mavi Petroleum, Inc., doing business as Tylersville, Sunoco.
Also move.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Jones, if you'll call the roll.
Mrs. Stoker?
Yes?
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Okay. We have arrived again then at citizens' comments. If there is any citizen or property owner or business owner who would like to address the Board of Trustees? Yes, sir. If you'd like to come down. If you'll come down and give us your name and address, please.
My name is Barry Rydell. I live at 8069 Lawrence Drive. I've come here tonight to address the commercial parking on residential property. That was an amendment to the zoning text in August of last year. The amendment to our zoning regulations restricted commercial parking in residential areas. Now, I don't want that confused with the right-of-way. I'm talking about the driveways. They reference the code.
I apologize. Could you talk a little bit louder? We're having a little trouble. Is the microphone on there? Okay, if you just speak up, then thank you.
The code changes also reference or altered the definition to classify a commercial vehicle that would be prohibited. And it was used, there was a restriction by width definition included in the code changes. In doing so, every person with a dual rear wheel truck, work truck, is prohibited from parking his work truck at his home. Non-commercial trucks of the exact same size or single rear wheel trucks are excluded. A single rear wheel truck with a toolbox would also be prohibited, as would almost every trailer, utility trailer, regardless of length. The very nature of the skilled trades that tend to incline towards their work trucks being in that restrictive width definition are small. They tend to be the skilled trades, the craftsmen, the service providers. They also generally choose a dual rear wheel truck due to safety reasons. Regarding the bed attached toolboxes, it's also related to the trade because they need to use the bed or the storage area of the truck to carry the materials of their trade. This text amendment pushes that ability out of their trucks. The people likely to have the prohibited vehicle in their driveway are also not likely to own a commercial property or business, which is what the code directs them to do, is to park their vehicle at a commercial facility. Thus, in my opinion, the changes target the service and skilled trades, the workers of companies, the self-employed, specifically. Also, the out-of-character vehicles are most likely to appear in the lower income areas, the lower property value areas, the areas where the blue-collar people are able to afford the homes. It's my opinion that the cost of the property in the neighborhoods that the prohibited vehicles would be out of character have natural filters by virtue of the cost of the area, by the cost of the homes. They also have a homeowners association that can address issues like that without making a township-wide policy. Also, I want to address the timeliness of this. We just listened to one of the trustees discuss the recession and the impact. While Westchester enjoys a lower unemployment than the national average and even the state average, these trades, the skilled trades, the home service providers, the contractors, have been hit harder than most of the other areas of employment. This restriction, in my opinion, places an additional hardship at a time that it, in my opinion, would be the worst time. These are the people that service the property. And it's my understanding that these amendments were instituted to address the appeal and character of our community. But these are the people that provide the curb appeal. They're your landscapers. They're the people that come to your homes and fix your roof, your driveways, clean your homes. And I feel that to take a segment of our community and push it out to the other townships or other areas is just unfair. It's unfair not just to the people that provide the service, but it's unfair to the homeowners because proximity, it has a direct impact on price. And lastly, I'd like to address the township meeting where the issue was voted on. There was during the public comment section, there was a citizen that came up and addressed this exact issue. The presentation showed semi-trailers and a large rollback truck. And Mr. Ruhlman, who I believe is present today, actually addressed the issue and the concern about the people that drive their work trucks home. And the township trustees and the people of Westchester in that meeting were assured by the zoning department that this was not aimed at those people. And yet, this is how it's being enforced. I've looked at private property parking restrictions in our general area and across Ohio and across the nation. And these issues, as presented, are handled similarly as presented by the township on August the 9th of last year. The tractor trailers, the large commercial trucks are excluded. But it's done in such a way that it doesn't address the small contractor with a dual rear-wheel truck, which is very common, both for commercial and non-commercial purposes. I just believe that at this point in time, I think that the township doesn't need a restrictive driveway, a width-defined driveway parking restriction. I think it unfairly impacts a small group of our citizens in Westchester. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rydell. Would anybody else like to address the Township Board? Seeing nobody get up, we're moving on to discussion items and trustee comments. Mrs. Boyko, you had a few items you wanted to bring up.
And I'm not sure if the board would like me to address any of the comments Mr. Rydell shared?
I'd be glad to.
Or would you like to prefer to wait until later, after you've had the opportunity to discuss it amongst yourselves?
I would very much like Mr. Rydell's comments to be addressed. It's up to the pleasure of the board. Would you like to do Mrs. Boyko's first and then get on to...
Why don't we hear your parking things first, because I have some comments about what Mr. Rydell said, and we'll share all those together.
Certainly can. This evening's discussion item, there are several township streets that the police department, with concurrence from Lakota Local Schools, is recommending for consideration of a no parking zone. These streets are fronting or in close proximity to a school, obviously. Although boundaries and restrictions may vary, the recommendation stems from a public safety interest to ensure the safety of students crossing respective streets is not hindered by sight distance because of parked vehicles. and to remedy the congestion of buses, but also to limit the potential conflict of parked vehicles and pedestrians crossing particular streets when either loading or unloading for school purposes. The three areas and boundaries for these no parking considerations are Manor Drive, which is being proposed again by the police department in concurrence with the Lakota local schools. Manor Drive is a street off of Cox Road, as I'm sure the board is aware, and this one is unique because it actually has a sidewalk in between two existing residents. If you see the blue line at the top part of your aerial, that is the sidewalk that is built and constructed between two single-family residences that enters off of Manor Drive and then allows the students to walk to the two schools, Hopewell Elementary and Junior. So the proposal is to propose both sides of the street as no parking. The north side would be a distance between two intersecting cul-de-sacs, and it's illustrated on the map. And the south side of Manor Drive would be approximately 2 parcels deep in either direction from the existing sidewalk. I know that's not a very scientific number, but if the board does agree to process and proceed with implementing no parking zones, those dimensions will be very accurately depicted on any documentation. This Manor Drive, though, the recommendation is to propose the no parking during restricted hours only. So it's not going to be 24/7. It would be during school days only, and it would be from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. So there would be minimal impact to the existing single-family homes that are affected by this frontage, but would still achieve the goal of what the police department and Lakota schools are trying to achieve. The second would be Minuteman Way. This is where Adena Elementary School is located. And again, it'd be both sides of the street along the frontage, generally the frontage of Adena Elementary School. And it would generally encompass the distance of the identified school zone, so where the flashing lights are currently. And again, the actual dimension will be more accurately depicted should the board proceed and pursue this concept. Again, this particular location would be restricted hours as well, and they would be from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 2:30 to 3:30 p.m., again, school days only. So weekends would not be impacted, holidays when the school is closed would not be impacted, and of course, throughout the summer, not be impacted. The last for the board's consideration in determining if you'd like to pursue this concept is Smith Road. Board of Familiar intersects State Route 747 in Towlersville and connects those two arterial roadways. The recommendation would be both sides of the street along the frontage of Endeavor Elementary School, again, generally encompassing the distance of the identified school zones and segments of the two intersecting streets. This one would not only include Smith Road, but there's also two intersecting subdivision streets that intersect with Smith Road, and those are depicted again by the red lines. Endeavor, this particular instance is a little more unique. Smith Road is really a collector road and a connector road, so there are no homes that front this. So it is the recommendation of the police department to consider 24/7 no parking along this particular stretch, and also along the segments of the intersecting roadways going into the subdivisions. Again, would be 24 hours, all time, all days. And this one in particular comes generally as a request from the Homeowners Association for their specific street. So there will be little dissension, at least from the collective group of that Homeowners Association of the Ridge of Providence subdivision. So although this evening I'm not requesting any kind of formal action, but wanted to get a census of the board's consideration to pursue these no parking because based on statute, there's a very lengthy and detailed process. There are temporary, or by the time school starts on August 23rd, these streets and roadways will be marked as temporary no parking. So as we determine the process, and if the board determines the process to continue, then it won't be any surprise in 2-3 months when the permanent no parking zones are established. So they would be cited or marked as temporary no parking. So again, not looking for any formal direction, but just a census from the board if you are interested in pursuing this, because your consideration then would trigger a very lengthy process of notification to the affected property owners, notification, postings throughout conspicuous areas in the township, and also establishment of a public hearing where the affected property owners would be notified and able to come and voice their opinion.
Did you say that these no parking zones are requested by the Lakota school system or by the police department?
It's concurrence. I think concurrence is probably the best way. I think that the police department identified some safety concerns based on the reduced busing, and more parents or more and more third-party driving their students, their children and students to school. And so I think they've identified it and then consulted with the Lakota local schools for their concurrence, and they do concur.
Are there any bus drop-off or pickup on Manor Drive?
The schools program of busing, whether it's through contracted services or retained inherent, they have a traffic plan that all the buses are on site. So no students are dropped off on the roadway if they're being bused. They must circulate into the school property to be dropped off.
So
Is the
on Manor Drive,
for
the
parents? I apologize.
so Manor Drive is mainly pedestrian for the student to cut between the two houses.
Well, it's the conflict. There are parents that drop off students now at that crosswalk or at that sidewalk, and then they walk to school. So it's the conflict between those parents parked or people picked up parked and those students that are now leaving the sidewalk and not necessarily paying much attention or.
Right.
We hopefully shouldn't have to regulate, personal safety, but.
Judy, I noticed there weren't many residences that were affected. Have we had any communication with any of them at all?
No, we have not. No, we have not. But the temporary no parking in a lot of the instances are up, so those residents are at least indirectly aware that.
Yeah.
Currently.
Before I made a decision, I'd like to get some feedback from the residents. And my other question was regarding the 24-hour endeavor. What if there's an event at the school that has overflow parking, the school fair, you see the ball fields, a game, a competitive game? Would the people then have to go park in the subdivisions and walk down?
Well, the Smith Road, just by its design and engineering, really wouldn't allow parking on it anyway, because it's a two-lane road and the lanes are it's windy and the lanes are fairly slim, and so you wouldn't be able to fit a parking, somebody would not be able to park and then properly have two vehicles pass appropriately without passing that yellow line. So if the board does not want to consider all of these because of the concern for the resident and the impacted resident, endeavor at a minimum should be considered because there really shouldn't be any parking on that roadway anyway, whether it's related to the school or not. It's just exacerbated because of the drop-offs in the location of the school.
Yeah.
As I understand it, part of the process, if we say go move forward with this, would be to notify the residents.
Yes.
So we could get their feedback.
Yes. Should the board wish to consent to initiate this process, at your next meeting, you would motion to commence the no parking zone and establish a public hearing date. From there, all of the property owners would be notified of that public hearing, and we would give ample notice. Trustee Lang, I know next meeting at fast forwarding at the September 11th meeting, you will be a prior obligation with the Butler County EMA, so you will not be here, so we will of course not conduct the hearing then. The next date would be to conduct the public hearing at your September 25th meeting. So notices would go out before the end of August, and they would have ample notice of review.
And if we direct staff to move forward, that's not committing us at that time.
No,
It's just
certainly-
starting a process.
Certainly through the public hearing.
It doesn't imply a decision. Excuse me.
No, I interrupted you. Certainly through the public hearing process, if you receive opposition or comments that make this decision arbitrary and not reasonable, then certainly you can not approve it or just discontinue the process at any time.
Okay, is it the sense of the board then to direct the staff to
I'm okay moving forward, understanding the point Ms. Stoker just said, that's not a commitment, we're just exploring to see if it's something that makes sense.
If the board needs additional meeting before you want to make a decision, that certainly, before you can share your consent, your I can, but if you're okay with understanding that the process will reveal any opposition.
I'm okay moving forward. We have enough time between now and anything substantial that happens for us to do our individual research on this.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Wong?
Well, do what people want, so let's let the process roll.
Okay, sounds like you've got your direction met.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Thank you very much.
Would you like to address Mr. Rydell's, some of his concerns?
Well, I just want to share one point with the board, is that Mr. Rydell actually had a very well-prepared position on the issue and how he's directly impacted, and we have had several exchanges with Mr. Rydell, not only from a staff perspective, but Mr. Riddle actually attended the Zoning Resolution Review Committee. The Zoning Resolution Review Committee had their first public presentation on the status of its review and its sections of the code that it's been reviewing so far, and I know he voiced a similar position with that Zoning Resolution Review Committee, and I applauded him because I believe that was the best forum to do that. The Board of Trustees at this time is not considering any revisions to the zoning resolution until that review, my understanding is, until that review committee has finished its review and its process and made recommendations to the Board of Trustees on how to proceed. So certainly I will engage with Mr. Yingling and ensure that the Zoning Resolution Review Committee has heard all of his particular points, which were very astute, and that they are at least incorporating it as part of their deliberations to make sure that no unintended consequences had resulted from.
I wasn't real clear, was he speaking of both parking on the street and parking in his driveway? Or was it just parking on the street?
My interpretation is previous exchanges of emails, he did cite both the prohibited commercial parking on the public right-of-way that was enacted by a resolution by the Board of Trustees. But this evening's discussion, I inferred that he mostly is concerned about the zoning resolution provisions.
I can remember the discussion, and I remember being mostly the discussion that sticks in my memory was the concerns about on our typical, especially older streets that aren't so wide, if you put a 7-foot wide, and that's what we're talking about, 84 inches, 7-foot wide vehicle on each side, and somebody has a heart attack, you're not going to be able to get a life squad to them. And that was the thing that stuck in my mind the most. But I'm glad he did speak to the zoning review committee, because that's really the place to start consideration for.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start.
I don't think anybody wants to stop tradespeople from.
Right. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't alleviate the punitive action taken by the township currently against Mr. Rydell. And I remember this very well. We had great discussions about this, and I did meet with Mr. Rydell prior to this meeting. He got called and asked for a meeting, and his concern isn't the right-of-way. He understands that. It's when he parks it in his driveway. And when we were talking about this, Brian Elliff assured me this was aimed at 18-wheelers. This was not aimed at small business people with significantly smaller vehicles. Even though it may be 84 inches, it doesn't have the mass of a 18-wheeler. You know, what he's talking about really is a dually oversized pickup truck, which is very common for people in various trades to have. And Brian Elf assured me this was aimed at 18-wheelers, and it was not going to be aimed at vehicles parking in their own driveway unless they were putting an 18-wheeler in their own driveway. And I believe part of this conversation actually took place on the public record, and I did not go back and review the tapes, so that's just my recollection. My concern at the time was how the resolution was worded, and he assured me that enforcement would not be initiated against small business people with worker utility trucks in their driveway. It wasn't aimed at the small business guy with work or utility trucks that were in their driveway. And I understood that Mr. Rydell spoke to the zoning review committee, and that's exactly where this thing belongs, in my opinion. We should not take drastic measures. I've spoken with some people in the zoning review committee, and they have told me that after Mr. Rydell's meeting, they are going to take this up. However, that process is 3, 6, 9, 12 months away. So I hope that this is an issue. I know this is an issue they're going to address. So I recommend that we consider putting enforcement of this section of the code on hold unless it is just an absolute 18-wheeler until the zoning review committee completes its work and the trustees take actions on their recommendations.
Just a quick point of order. Maybe you have clarification. You might want to be referencing Brian Bierman, because last year Brian Eliff was not here. He did not present the
Maybe I
zoning
meant
resolution.
Brian Bierman.
Okay,
I apologize.
just want to make sure.
Brian Bierman, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of us arbitrarily, I'm not even sure we have the authority to say we're just going to declare this particular code unenforceable or not enforceable at this time. Suppose I'd rather hear from the police chief to find out what their strategy is. What is it that they're doing out there with these issues? If we were given assurance that they were not speaking of a typical tradesperson's vehicle in the tradesman or woman's own driveway,
Yeah.
then what are they doing? I'd frankly, rather than jumping to not enforcing something, let's hear about what they're doing so we'll know what we're talking about.
Well, my only point is, if they're in the right-of-way, I got that. But if it's a trades vehicle that's not an 18-wheeler, that's parked in a guy's driveway, but it's 7 foot, it's just an arbitrary standard that we set, probably based on
It's
some
not
good logic.
arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is arbitrary. We could have said 92 inches, we could have said 21. We said 74, based on probably standards. That's-
I think it was based on what typical amount of room you need on the road to get an emergency vehicle through, and what was left over for people
Let's
to
pretend that's
park.
what it was. Let's pretend that's
Okay.
exactly what it was. So we have a guy who's parking in his driveway, and we are enforcing this against him, saying, hey, you can't park your vehicle in your driveway. That was never the intent of this code.
I don't remember that. Chris, I don't remember, other than the issue of being able to get emergency vehicles down the road. I don't remember them discussing tradespeople parking in their own driveway.
I think
But
you're
would love to
conflicting
get
the
some
two. I think you're
input
conflicting
on
the
it.
two. The zoning, the resolution the trustees enacted was for prohibiting commercial vehicles on public right-of-way of that same dimension, the 84.
We're talking along the side of the road, not
Right.
talking about driveways.
And public safety, that was a key component of that, the rationale in bringing that resolution to the Board of Trustees. What Trustee Lang is referencing, and what Mr. Riddle is referencing, is the zoning resolution that governs the private property. So and that certainly wasn't public safety related. That was more
Aesthetic.
zoning regulations, review, you're investing in your property, have certain expectations of what types of vehicles will be parked. It's my understanding that there are multiple vehicles, so I don't think it was just one particular vehicle on this particular property. There's multiple vehicles that potentially are in violation, and that they can be certainly looked at and reviewed, and I think that's what the Community Development Department has been working with Mr. Riddle on these issues. I think I would caution the board in just disregarding current zoning
Yeah,
provisions
I'm loath to
and
do
not
that.
enforcing them.
Not a good idea.
Certainly, that is something, the board, I don't even know how you effectuate that, other than, just kind of turning the other
Well,
cheek.
there's an equal protection of the law thing. We can't just arbitrarily decide to
Correct.
enforce one law and not another.
Well,
What
But it's
we need to
unfortunate,
do
it's
is-
unfortunate that, if there were any unintended consequences by
And that needs
this
to be looked
application,
into.
we
And-
certainly need to rectify it, remedy it in the long term. And the short term, I can pledge to the board, I'll talk to Mr. Yealing to see if there are any short-term remedies that are within
Our authority.
the authority of the zoning code, but allow some relief to Mr. Riddle. I can't promise that there are, but we certainly will scour to see if we can.
Well, and in the meantime, Mr. Riddle has certainly done the right thing by going before
Certainly
the Board of Zoning,
Revision.
Zoning
Well,
Review Committee.
I just remember this resolution clearly, and I was not in favor of supporting it because I saw the potential unintended consequence. And I was told that this was not aimed at an individual parking in his driveway with a trade van, even if it exceeded the 74 inches. That's not what this was aimed at. And it's unfortunate that it turned this way. If we don't take action tonight and zoning does not change their stance, we're putting Mr. Rydell in a very difficult position.
Well, I think we've directed staff to talk with Mr. Euling and our board to review the statute and see if there is an appropriate way at this time of dealing with it while this request for a modification of the zoning board is going through, zoning code is going through the process. Like I say, I'm very loath to just decide, okay, we're just not going to enforce a regulation.
Well,
If we don't like the regulation, we got to change the regulation.
Right. I'm okay with what you just said as long as it is then applied uniformly. We don't just make an exception for Mr. Rydell. It's applied uniformly against other people that fall into that category so that they don't keep coming back while the zoning review committee. And it's possible the zoning review committee is going to say, no, we don't want to do this. But the other thing I was emphasizing when we had this conversation in 2011 is that I thought this was a decision the homeowners association should make. And I was convinced that there are enough parts of Westchester that don't have a homeowners association representing them that this action needed to take place.
Well, I think Mr. Rydell's at the right place at the zoning review commission, and that's where it should be discussed.
Could you report back to us
I certainly can.
whatever discussions Mr. Rydell has with Mr. Euling and see if there is some way that we can appropriately, within our authority, provide some relief, as you say, to this unintended consequence of perhaps well-meaning regulation, but.
And I'm certainly not predetermining an outcome, nor trying to pessimistically say, I just want to manage expectations, that we certainly will give due diligence and be very thorough in our review of remedies. However, I cannot guarantee that I will come up with something, so just want
I
to
have
make sure.
confidence in you and Mr. Union.
No pressure. We certainly give it the old college try.
Thank you. Are there any other topics you'd like to?
Yeah, I have one more comment, and it's regarding Mr. Ruhlman's comments. He's been talking about pushing back and what are we going to do to push back. And I've just been thinking about that for a while, and I'm just going to make a pledge to meet with our state senator and our state rep to talk about the unfunded mandates that are pushed down from the state. I'm also going to go to Columbus and visit with the Ohio Township Association, share my concerns with them, see if I can get their help in helping me to push back against the state on unfunded mandates. And I plan at a later point at initiating a similar strategy at the federal level. But I'm going to see what I can do at the state level for now.
Mr. Walton?
I have no comment.
Okay. Nobody likes unfunded mandates for sure. I personally have no problem with traffic sign regulation. I think that's part and parcel of the U.S. constitutional and federal government's constitutional right to regulate interstate traffic. But if we got some other stuff, I'd certainly like to hear it. If
Well,
you'd like to.
I agree with you, but if they're going to change the standards, they need to give us the funds to pay for it. They could change the standards again in 6 months, right after we get all new signs up. And it's not fair to the taxpayers of Westchester for us to allow the federal government to do that. I understand about the uniformity of signs, that's very important. But, you know, if someone comes out with a new technology with better reflectivity and 6 months after we put our new signs up, it's quite a burden and it's not fair.
I hear what you're saying, George, but I want to share a little secret with you. All tax money comes out of the taxpayers' pockets, whether it comes from the federal government or it comes from here.
Oh, the federal government, they just print money and borrow it.
I think it's a lot more efficient for us to do as much as we can locally. That way we have local control. And we can, for example, something we did some years back, is go through and analyze, for example, all our road systems. Remember that when we were photographing the ditches, the signs, the everything we could think of, culverts, so that we could take on a coordinated, logical plan for regular maintenance and correct clearly unnecessary stuff. I would rather us do that. I think it's far more efficient for us to do it than to go to the federal government, ask them, because any money that passes through their hands, you know, that leaves an awful lot behind, sticking to their fingers before it comes back to us. And we have a site department that takes care of, you know,
And
signs.
just maybe
We
they'll
don't-
get the message that unfunded mandates are unconstitutional, and they should stop forcing them on local governments.
I think it depends on the mandate. I'm sure there are a whole bunch that we could talk about. Some, like traffic signs, I don't have a problem with. I'm glad when Mike and I drove out to California last year, by golly, all the signs tend to look alike. They're the same shape, the same size.
I agree with you on that one.
And not just for individual citizens, but for people engaged in interstate traffic.
Sure.
You know, for truck drivers, this is real important.
Yep.
And I wouldn't want to see one type of sign in one state changing to a different type of sign in another.
We'll
I have no
talk about that
problem.
either.
And the federal government is the one who logically makes those standards, so they apply to all the states. So like I say, I'm sure there are plenty of unfunded mandates. I'm sure there are some, particularly applying to schools.
No doubt about it.
But traffic signs just don't do it for me.
Well, there's a whole list of items I have besides these traffic signs.
No, I
And
imagine
I'm
you
starting
do.
at the state, so they have nothing to do with the traffic signs.
I imagine you do. And Mr. Wong, you still have nothing you'd like to add to it?
No?
In that case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We don't have executive session tonight, do we? I'll entertain a motion then to adjourn.
Also moved.
Second?
Discussion? Mr. Jones, if you'll call the roll.
Mrs. Stoker?
Yes?
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Thank you very much for attending. We are adjourned.